Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast. The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Well, good morning and welcome to Tuesday. It is the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, and around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you will find the audio-only live stream, the links to our social media sites where we simulcast the radio show, and of course, links to the podcast as well. Good morning and welcome. Tuesday. Who brought the tacos? Who brought the tacos this morning? It's Taco Tuesday. I could really use some breakfast tacos right now. You know, those ones. Remember the ones that they made with the eggs, where the egg was the shell, and then the favorite one is where they weave the bacon into the taco shell, and then they fill it full of eggs and stuff. Either one of those would be fantastic this morning. Taco Tuesday. I mean, the bacon one is a lot of work, but yum. That would be delicious. Delicious. All right. So what do we got today here on the program? Well, it's Tuesday, and that means we're going to have some deep dive analysis by Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, who's going to be joining us and talking with us about, a couple things. First and foremost, we're going to get some info and analysis from him on the senatorial majority, the makeup of that. What is it going to be? What's it going to be? And what does that mean for us in the long run? So we're going to have some discussions on that this morning and figure out where we go from here. We're also going to talk about the price of oil. And then finally, we're going to ask the big question, and that is, where is Alaska headed? And who's leading us there? And who are our leaders on this? It's gonna be an interesting question, and I gotta say, I'm not fully excited about the answers to that. Let's just put it there, and we'll have those discussions. We'll also have some rehashing and recap of that in hour two, maybe some phone calls for you members that would like to sound off. I haven't talked to nearly enough listeners here since we had our vacation. And so maybe we'll take a few phone calls, and then we will dive into it with our friend Chris Story, who's going to come in and give us the rundown and our life coaching lesson. And we're going to need that uplift. I guarantee it. We're going to need that uplift going into after our discussion with Brad. It's going to be a fun time for all. So we're looking forward to it, and we'll see where it goes from there. All right, so that's the full rundown. And yes, a little chilly. I see a lot of comments in the chat room this morning about the temperatures. Everything from 12 below down here on KGB. My house is only about 6 below, so I'm on a bit of a rise, which is lucky. but 21 below in Fairbanks and 10 below in other parts of Wasilla, about 8 below in downtown Anchorage. And yeah, winter is here. And we're going to feel this for at least, well, they're saying, I guess, the next couple days. But by the end of the week, we're supposed to get a little bit of a warm up by the end of the week. There's supposed to be some warmer weather rolling in, but we'll see. We'll see what goes on from there. We'll you can only hope. And then Paul has to tease us with the fact that it's 33 degrees in Kodiak. Just remind yourself that there are other places in this great state where you don't have to live, where it is in the double digits below zero. Just remember that. There's always someplace warmer in the state. Of course, the antithesis of that is that there's always someplace colder in the state. That's for sure. All right. Well, what are some of the big stories that we have going on around the state? There's a story in the Juneau Empire talking about ranked choice voting and how there's going to be a huge debate over this in this year's legislative session. And we could talk about that. The election certification issue is certainly going to cause some problems. That's for sure. The Alaska Division of Elections, of course, is set to certify and announce the certification of all the races in the state today. And there will be some recounts. There's one race, the Tom McKay race, which is a 4-vote race, is probably going to trigger a recount after the certification, strictly based on the fact that it's 0.04% difference between the two candidates. Maybe even the District 11 race between Julie Columby and Walter Featherly, where there's a 110 vote difference. It may be Featherly and he may ask for a recount. He may not. He's entitled to one at that kind of rate, but that is that's dubious for sure. But then you've got, of course, the two different races that are have a potential for the legal challenges. One has got a definite legal challenge, and that is, I'm still not used to where this mic is. That is David Eastman's, who won his district by 51%, but a judge has ordered that the divisions of election not certify his race until the trial involving his eligibility to serve is settled. And that could take weeks, maybe. I mean, it could take a few weeks. The other one is the one for Jennifer Armstrong, which initially a prior court case has been dismissed for lack of standing, I think, if I can't remember. But once it's certified, it was a timing issue. I think that's what it was, that they had time. It was the deadline to challenge her candidacy had passed, I think was the answer to that. But it can be challenged after it's certified that she did not have the residency requirements in hand for that. So that could lead to it. Now, the Republicans will have a majority with 21 elected, but if Eastman is hanging out in the wings and unable to be certified, and if Louise Stutes defects again to the Democrats, then this could, and the Jennifer Armstrong thing goes nowhere, then the House organization could be in a bit of limbo. And it's this is a real thing. I mean, this is a real thing that is going to leave us kind of hanging. Now, with a vote of 21, here's the thing: Louise Stutes can write her own ticket. You realize that even with a vote of 21, she could stay with the Republicans and be offered, leadership positions, committee chairs. She could be offered a lot. But if she decides to defect over to the Democrats, she could write her own ticket over there and again be Speaker of the House. And the question is, will anybody go with her? I think is the bigger question. Because it would be a 2020 split, right? If she decided to defect over to the House, you would have to have other members of the Republicans join to form a new coalition majority on the other side of 22 or 23, something substantive. You know, you can't have a 2020 split, and riding the rails on a 21-19 split in the legislature, in the House, is already a dog's body breakfast. I mean, that is not a good thing, because essentially you will always have one person who has control over major votes and things like that, because they can just jump onto the other side of the fence. So I don't know. I mean, as quick and easy as it was to organize the Senate this year, it's going to be on the opposite side of the scale for the House. It's going to be more difficult, and it's going to be it's going to be long lasting. I guess it all depends on how fast this judge is willing to go through this trial for eligibility. And I guess it also means, I mean, once the certification has dropped today for these races, I guess then it will be I'm thinking that somebody's probably waiting in the wings with a new lawsuit for the Jennifer Armstrong case, that may drop into the bucket the second that the certification is verified, because then it's a whole new deal. But I guess we'll see. We'll wait and see and see what goes on with that. But those are the kind of things that I'm watching for today, to see what's going to happen, because in the long run, we've got to get the legislature organized. And I was thinking more about this yesterday, and I know we were a little doom and gloom yesterday. I wasn't trying to be doom and gloom. I guess I was in my prepare for the worst and hope for the best kind of mood, right? That was my mood yesterday. That I think that gridlock is not a bad thing. If we could control the House, if we, meaning those of us who are smaller government people, could control the House, and the Senate is set up as it is right now with a pro-government spend, anti-PFD crowd, and then you got Dunleavy, it kind of sets up a bit of gridlock. That's not a bad thing. A little bit of gridlock goes a long way. And we're going to see that in the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Legislature. I think that's a good thing. But anyway, we'll get some analysis on this from our friend Brad Keithley and see what he has to say. That's coming up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with Brad Keithley right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Your mental suppository. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, our guest here on the program, and I realized that I hadn't set up a secondary. Yeah, we'll just do that. I hadn't set up a secondary screen on this because I'm still using my laptop. Because my other computer died. I'm still have not set up a thing for my StreamYard thing. So let me fix this. Real quick. Just gonna do this and turn that off and turn that off and that off. I gotta turn everything in the world off. Okay. Nope, I need that. Okay. Nope. Yep. And yep. There we go. Okay, so sorry, we got to get that going on over here, and that over here, and one final thing. Look at that. That is, oh, you got to hold the key down. Got to hold the key down. All right, let me do that, and whoop. Nope. Yep. Don't move. Okay. Come on. There we go. I'll get it. Hey, look, I got it. Okay. All right. So now we'll do this. We'll go over and we'll grab Brad. How about that? We'll grab Brad and see what he has to say this morning. Hello, my friend. How
Good
are
morning,
you doing?
Mike. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
You know, I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad. A little better than yesterday. Yesterday, I had a lot of anxiety because I'd broken the world, but now I feel a little bit better. How are you doing, sir? How was your turkey day?
Oh, it was great. It was great. Turkey and dressing and mashed potatoes and pumpkin pie and all that stuff and wine. So
And
it,
wine. And wine. And wine. Because I know
it,
I had a bottle of Bear Creek apricot peach wine with the dinner with the turkey. It was delicious.
so dessert with the meal. Is that what you're saying?
It was great because you had the cranberry sauce and the turkey, and especially some of the dark meat that's really flavorful, and then you had the wine on. It was great. It was great. It was delicious.
That's great. Well, you seem in a good mood this morning. Did you get a lot of sleep last night?
No, not really. I'm working on about 6 hours of sleep, so I mean, it's a normal thing here. But no, I'm feeling. I guess more than anything, I'll be honest, it was a very stressful weekend with the tear down of the studio and the putting everything back together and the discovery that I'd broken my main computer for everything. And so I was a little stressed yesterday, but today it's all good. It's only radio. Nobody's going to die. So
You're chilled out.
it's it. I'm often reminded by one of my friends is that, it's radio. No one's going to die. That's the mantra. So it's all good. Although
Well,
I did have to laugh because my daughter didn't finish I had blackout curtains in the studio, and they're also very heavy and they hold the cold off the window, and she didn't put the curtains back up, so it's cold in here this morning. So you may hear my heater run a little bit because it's a little chill. There's no heat in here, so
we're going to hear heaters run throughout the state this morning. You may hear mine in the background.
Yeah, exactly. So you ready to dive into that? I mean, I can't imagine what you must have been thinking as you looked at the press conference last Friday as the Senate majority announced their takeover of the world. But I think I can't wait to get your analysis of this. This should be interesting. Any highlights here before we got about a minute?
Oh, Giesel's back.
Oh my God. Every news story that I read this morning mentions Kathy Giesel in it somewhere. And I just, every time I just look at it and go, oh my.
The morphosis of, is that a word? Anyway, the morphing of Giesel from where she was when she was first elected back in the early 20 teens.
The metamorphosis, right? Yeah.
To now it's just amazing. I mean,
yeah.
Now she's being referred to as a moderate, and now she's talking about the need for agreement and all that sort of stuff.
I know, it's insane. All right, well, hold the line, Brad. We're going to jump back into this, and we're going to get things ready to go. Folks, like and share the show, like and follow the show page. Let's get things going on. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. All right, welcome back to the program. Oh, baby. We're ready to go. It is the Michael Duke Show. And it's Tuesday, which means we got to do that deep dive thing. Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets is going to jump on board. In fact, he's with us right now. Happy post-Turkey Day. And welcome back to the program, Brad. Just another beautiful day in paradise, huh?
Another very cold day in paradise, at least.
Boy, it's a little brisk, yeah.
Well, I'm ready to go, Michael. It looks like you've gotten some sleep. You're energized. I'm ready to go. We're all set to go.
I'm ready, man. I'm ready. So the weekly top three. Let's dive into this because this is the one that I've been waiting for since the end of last week. As I read some of the things that were coming out, and I mean, I tried to stay unplugged all weekend, but you can't avoid everything. And of course, the commentary on the social medias about the Senate majority announcement and everything else that all came out. So let's start off there. The Senate and where we're going from here. The bipartisan Senate majority with 9 Democrats and 8 Republicans. Interesting. What do you say?
Well, I think after the election results, it probably wasn't surprising. I'm a little bit surprised at James Kaufman, who at one time seemed to be a fairly strong Republican, and Jesse Bjorkman and some others crossing over and joining the coalition. But it was clearly going to be a bipartisan coalition from the time we got the election results. I think what it means is that we're going to be spending. With the announcement that Senator Stevens, when he announced the majority, he said the new Senate majority's top issues will be lowering energy costs, improving education, and revitalizing the economy. Leaders stated in a press release and subsequent press conference Friday evening in Anchorage. And those 3 things are spending. Lower energy costs. I assume they mean by that renewables, picking up on the governor's pitch for renewables, and somehow creating incentives for additional renewables. Maybe spending some on the main line between Fairbanks, the road system main line between Fairbanks and Anchorage and down to Homer, to ensure that it's able to take on additional renewables wherever they come on the system. And so energy costs, I think, means spending. Improving education, that certainly means spending. in the discussion that these people had during the campaign, and since it's been about we need to spend more to help K through 12. I mean, some people would say, "Oh, improve education." Well, that means cutting out administrators and being more efficient about what we're doing. But I don't think that's what the Senate majority has in mind when they talk about improving education. And the third one is revitalizing the economy. And since a lot of these folks think that the government drives the economy,
that's the government's job, right? I mean, to create the economy and to make jobs and to do all, instead of get out of the way.
Yeah, I think that's we're going to see some proposals for spending in terms of revitalizing the economy, whatever that means, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the third segment when we get to talking about Ada. But those are the 3 priorities. Where does the PFD fit in all that? Well, there's a quote. There's a quote.
It's my favorite quote already.
It's a quote from Giesel in the ADN, and here it is. We're all committed to the largest dividend that we can afford, but we also know that there are state services that are critical to Alaskans. Education probably comes to the forefront of our thoughts," said Giesel. Said Giesel. So all of that has to be weighed out, she said. So we've elected a state senate at least that's going to be committed to the largest dividend that we can afford, which is the old leftover dividend. It's fascinating, the evolution that Giesel's gone through from her time when she was first elected to the Senate, when I supported her for her election to the Senate in 2010, and all the way through to where she is now. It's not the same person. It's not.
Well, I remember Brad, I remember the commercial that she did where it was her and her husband sitting at their kitchen table, and she steals her husband's wallet and puts it down there and says, "They're stealing money from your dividend and they're doing this and that." And I don't know what happened. I mean, metamorphosis, used that word earlier. It is truly, I mean, it is a metamorphosis from, how did she go from they're stealing your PFD and we're going to get it back to, we're going to give you a dividend that we can afford, because we know better than you how to spend all this money.
So Michael, sometimes people, when they're describing Senator Lyman Hoffman, they use the term whatever it takes to stay in power. And I think we may see that. We may be seeing that with Giesel also. I mean, she started out willing to be in the minority. In fact, almost creating the minority, and certainly an aggressive advocate for the minority. It was 4 of them, I think, back in the day.
Yeah.
And she was, she was perfectly fine with that. It was almost David Eastman like, in terms of, I want to be in the minority. I think I can do stuff in the minority. And from there, we've gone all the way to where she is now, which I think, frankly, is explained by whatever it takes to be in power, whatever it takes to be in control, that she can direct the outcome. An ego thing, maybe. I know better than anybody, so I need to be in power so I can direct the outcome, sort of regardless of whatever that is. But it's an interesting evolution from where she started out. But I mean, that it is what it is, and I think we're facing a Senate that is going to be driven by spending. You were talking earlier about, maybe if the House organizes as Republicans, maybe we get into a bit of gridlock between the Senate and the House. I agree that there's the potential for some of that, but I think even the House, even if the Republicans organize the House, I think the House is going to be driven by some of these things. They're going to want to respond to energy issues. They're going to want to respond to education issues, K through 12 issues. It's going to be a big drive out of Anchorage to do that. So I think we're seeing in both bodies a desire to spend and to push government agenda forward. Government is being the savior forward. Nobody really knows. I mean, we've had all this recent spate right before the election, as is usually the case. This recent spate of articles on, the economy is in horrible shape. Alaska's 50th in the nation in terms of the economy. Our GDP's down, and a lot of other factors. Nobody really knows what it takes to get the Alaska economy going again, other than oil projects. I mean, we do know that. But other than that, nobody knows really what it takes to get the Alaska economy going. So I think we're going to see a lot of spinning wheels about trying to get the economy started, a lot of discussion about it. There will be those who say, well, that's really part of the reason why we need to increase education spending, both K through 12 and higher ed spending, because that will drive the economy. I mean, look at Harvard. Harvard drives the Boston economy.
Right.
We're going to see a lot of that sort of articulation. And what happens in that situation is people just want to spend. I mean, they want to demonstrate that they're doing something, that they recognize there's an issue, and they want to demonstrate they're doing something about it. And the drive is going to be, the impetus is going to be to spend going forward. So even if there is a Republican organization in the House, it's going to be a very thin one. And there's going to be House members who are going to be, want to spend more on education, want to demonstrate that they're doing something about the economy and about energy costs. And I think there's going to be a push to spend more. And we know the governor, the term we've used in previous shows is round heels. The governor has round heels. He'll rock first. He'll rock back, and he'll agree to stuff, and I think we're going to end up with a higher budget than we want. The issue, I think, for me, the issue is going to be who pays. I mean, it's going to be every day. I'm going to say something about who's paying for all this. And if you use PFD cuts, like we've talked about on the show a number of times, if you use PFD cuts, it's middle and lower income Alaska families. So you've got people like Giesel, people like Stevens with his state pension, others who are fairly well off in the legislature going, yeah, we need to spend more. We need to push forward, but I don't want to pay for it. So let's use PFD cuts and push the cost of middle and lower income Alaska families. And I think that's, to me, if there is a way of slowing this train down, the spending train down, it is to talk about who's paying, and to talk about the inequity of who's paying for all of this increased spending, and to say, look, if you want to spend this additional amount, then it needs to be broad based. We need to involve the top 20%. We need to involve non-residents, and we need to have a broad based spending or broad based revenue to support this spending. It shouldn't all just be piled up again on top of middle and lower income Alaska families. And as we talked about on the show before, I think if we're successful in that, or if that threat is real, I think the top 20% start saying, whoa, wait a second. We don't want to pay for this stuff. This is not stuff that we want. I mean, it's great as long as somebody else is paying for it. It's wonderful as long as middle and lower income Alaska families have to pay the bill. But you want us to pay for it? You want us to pay a share of it? Well, let's take a look at these costs. And I think that's where the pushback in this session is. I mean, there's going to be those who say no spending, stop spending, draw the line, no more dollars. That lost. That train left the station. That position lost in this election. Just look at Giesel. Right. Just look at the weather vane.
Well, we've talked about standing in the middle of the street and shouting, holding our fist out or hand out to the thing. No more spending, stop. And then they just run you over because they've got control of the legislature. They've got control of these things, and they're just pushing it forward, whether you like it or not.
I think that comes back. I think the stop spending, get costs under control. I think that urge comes back if you get the top 20% involved in having to be among those who pay for it. They're the donor class. They're the ones that have the ear of the legislators. They're the ones that hire the lobbyists that are operating down in Juneau. If the top 20% has to pay, or believe they're going to have to pay for some of this stuff, then I think we get pushback. But other than that, the stop spending crew, I think lost this election cycle. And Giesel, I mean, the terminology here, the largest dividend that we can afford after we've spent it all on other things. I mean, that's the clear signal. That's where they want to go. They want to push the cost down on middle and lower income Alaska families. So it's going to be, I mean, this is going to be a session of pushing back and finding ways to pushing back and effective ways of pushing back, as opposed to just, as you say, standing in the middle of the road and saying, no, and getting tire tracks all over you.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because again, this is you hit the quote. This is the one that I've been running with since this article came out. We're all committed to the largest dividend that we can afford. And of course, remember, this next session, we're not going to have high oil money, more than likely. We're not going to have a huge amount of oil money coming in. We're not going to have a bunch of federal money from the COVID stimulus or anything else that's coming in. And so when they say the highest dividend that you could afford, and we're expecting increased spending, I mean, we're talking about maybe a $500 dividend. We're talking maybe $1,000, but I mean, I would be super surprised. But then that leads to my question, and I know we're got to get to 2 and 3, but this leads to my question of, what does that look like in the future? I mean, how long until the dividend is just flat gone, and then they want to spend even more?
Well, Michael, we know the answer to that. I mean, we look at 2013 forward, when the savings accounts, the CBR and the SBR, were the dividend. They were the as much as we can afford component of the equation.
They were the proxy, right? They were the proxy for what we have happened today,
right? And they got spent away. If you don't get pushback from the top 20%, if you don't have all Alaska families, particularly the donor class, involved in saying stop on the spending, it just keeps going. And we saw that in the 2010s. We saw, we'll just spend a little bit more. We'll get it under control next year. Don't worry. We're committed to getting spending under control. But we got the savings account this year. We really, and we're in a recession, or the sky is purple today or something. Some reason we need to spend more, just a little bit more, and we'll just drain the savings down a little bit more. But we'll get it under control. Don't worry about it. And we went through the entire 20 teens. Doing that, and the savings kept going down and down and down and down and down and down and down until they're gone. And that's the perfect analogy, the perfect proxy, the perfect lesson about what's going to happen to the PFD.
Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We need to move on to number 2. Brad, I guess give me a quick 20-second tease here about number 2. What's going on with the price of oil?
Well, number 2 is what's going on with the price of oil. And we're going to talk. I mean, the price of oil is going to be a big issue this legislature. A year ago, you and I talked about oil prices are up. That's going to mean something for the legislature. Well, now we're going to talk about oil prices being down and what that means for the legislature this coming session. And it doesn't mean good things for the PFD. So we'll talk about that in the second segment.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We continue. It is the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, in the break, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Here's my question for you, Brad. Because we're looking at the makeup of the Senate coalition right now, and of course it's 9 Democrats, right, over 8 Republicans. Now they say, well, we need 11 to make anything goes to the floor. And I mean, but how hard do you think we're going to see a push as they realize that they're going to take all of the dividend and there's going to be some political pushback on that? How much of a push do you think we're going to see for changes to the oil tax structure? What do you think is going to happen? I mean, are we going to see a proposal for an SB 21 repeal, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing? But I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so we are going to see a push by some for oil taxes. It's unlikely to get out of the Senate. I mean, Giesel made sure that she is not only the majority leader, but she is co-chair of Senate Resources with Senator Bishop. So it's unlikely to get out of the Senate, but we are going to see a push for oil taxes. And I think we discussed this last week. It's sort of a kabuki theater. I mean, it's going to be, frankly, it's a top 20% misdirect. They're going to be saying, oh, well, if we need a bigger PFD, then we're just going to have to expand oil taxes. We're going to have to redo oil taxes, and the push will be, if you want a bigger PFD, you're going to have to fight with the oil companies, and blame the oil companies if you don't get a bigger PFD. So it's going to be in the mix. If the House goes coalition, probably more coming from the House than from the Senate, but it's going to be in the mix. But it's going to be an attempt at a misdirect. It's going to be an attempt to blame the lower PFD or the lack of a statute, certainly a statutory PFD or even a POMV 50/50 PFD, to blame that on the oil company. So, at the end of the day, the legislators can say, don't like your PFD. I tried, but it was the oil companies who pushed back, and it's the oil company's fault that you didn't get your bigger PFD, not me. So I think we're going to see some of that. If it somehow got through the legislature, I mean, you got to sort of think through these things. If it somehow got through the legislature, oil tax revival, and then Governor Dunleavy vetoed it, then the Democrats have the perfect world. It's like, well, we tried to get a bigger PFD by passing increased oil taxes, but the governor vetoed it. So you want to blame somebody for the level of your PFD? Blame it on the governor for vetoing what we got through. It's gonna be used as this foil out there that's to blame for the PFD. Now, you and I know, and everybody listening knows, the PFD is not dependent on oil taxes. The PFD is fully paid for. It's covered by permanent fund earnings. That's what the statute says. That's what the numbers say. PFD doesn't need any additional funding. But that's not the rhetoric we're going to hear as we go through this legislature. The rhetoric we're going to hear about by both Republicans and Democrats, I think, is going to be, if you want a bigger PFD, we're going to have to do something about oil taxes. The other thing, we didn't really get to this last program, but the other thing is that Willow and the Pica projects are going to play in this, right? The oil companies are going to go, well, you want an economy? You want to grow the economy? Then the Willow and the Pica projects are the way to do that. And by gosh, if you pass these oil taxes, we're not going to make those investments. So, you're going to drive us out of state. You're going to put that in investment money someplace else. So everybody's sort of got their own, role already carved out in this kabuki theater, all over the PFD, of trying to, frame oil taxes as the solution to the PFD, or frame oil taxes as the death to the Alaska economy by undermining Willow and Pica. It's all a misdirect to avoid confronting the fact that at the same time as they're doing all that, the legislature is taxing the heck out of the PFD and diverting it off to government.
We're 16 days from the governor having to produce a budget. And James asks a valid question. Square one is what the governor will put in the budget for his PFD. Last year, he started with a cut down POMV 50/50. So, I mean, I know the legislature, but do you think Dunleavy tries to stand strong on this and puts a full PFD in, and goes from there? I mean, what are your thoughts on that quickly here? I got less than 45 seconds.
Yep. He'll put a POMV 50/50 in, and then he'll play with inflation factors and all sorts of other things to make it look like it fits. It doesn't, but he'll put that in, and that'll be his starting point. So
the POMV, you don't think a full statutory, you think it'll be a 50/50?
Okay. No. The governor's going to stick with his POMV 50/50. He can't make the budget balance if he puts in a full statutory PFD and doesn't increase revenue someplace else.
Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're jumping back into it. Please like and share, like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube. Here we go. All right, Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets continues with us. It is the weekly top three. We're on to number 2, which is what's going on with oil prices, and where do we go from here on that? Brad Keithley, our guest here this morning. Brad, where do we start off here?
Well, last year at this time, Michael, you and I were talking about oil prices going up, and the legislature was going to have to confront the fact that revenues were going to be in a lot stronger shape than they had been for the past few years. And we spent a number of segments talking about various aspects of that. This year, I'm afraid we're going to be talking about oil prices going down relative to where they were at this time last year. Oil prices going down, and what that's going to mean for the legislature. Every morning, 6 days a week, we take Sundays off, but every morning, 6 days a week, we post what we call the 8:30 a.m. chart. And the 8:30 a.m. chart is sort of a running look at oil prices to date, combined with what the futures market is telling us where oil prices are heading tomorrow or heading in the future. And today, this morning's chart has fiscal year 23, the current fiscal year we're in, at $89 oil. That's compared to a budget that's based on $101 oil. Recall that at $87 we run through the SBR, and we're now into needing a CBR draw, the very little CBR we have left, the CBR draw in order to balance the budget. That'll be its own issue if that's what happens. But right now we're at $89. Next year, fiscal year 24, the futures market tells us we're at $80. For the year, compared again to 101 that this year's budget is based on. The outlook that the spring revenue forecast had for FY24 was $90. So we're $10 below where the spring revenue forecast told us we were going to be. So we're in a situation where oil prices and thus oil revenues are coming down. And spending is on a trajectory to go up. That leads to deficits. So
Hey, wait a second. Isn't this very reminiscent of the Parnell administration? Remember the Parnell administration? I think it was in 2013 or 2014, where they produced a budget that was based on $115 a barrel oil, and oil had cratered down into the low 70s, high 60s. And he's like, "Yep, this is the budget that we're putting forward." I mean, isn't it reminiscent of that same time? But yet we don't have the $15 billion in savings to back it up.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And that's why, in our previous discussion, that's why we talked about the PFD becoming the grease that gets caught in the middle, like savings did during the 2010s. Oil prices. There was a great article in the Financial Times yesterday. For anybody, it's a free access. This article is free access for anybody that really wants to understand what's going on with oil prices. It was a terrific article. Talks about the downward pressures being the economy, the potential for a recession, a global recession, and the effect that that's having on demand, and thus the effect on oil prices. It talks about what's going on in China with COVID restrictions and the fall in the Chinese economy, or the fall in Chinese demand, and dragging oil prices down. And then it talks about other factors. And basically, Michael, here's the point is, nobody knows where oil prices are going to go. We're going to have a high amount of uncertainty as we go into the spring. But the futures market, which is what the administration, I think, correctly uses as their bellwether for what oil prices are doing, the futures market is telling us that they're going to stay down. People with money who invest in these things are telling us that that oil prices are going to stay down for the foreseeable future. So that's the scenario, or that's the baseline, the factual baseline that we're going to come into the session with. And it's going to be a difficult session in terms of revenues, which will create some activity over on, let's go after oil taxes, pushback from Willow and Pika, sort of blocking that. And then, well, we got to spend on K through 12. We got to spend, on energy. We got to spend on, restarting the economy. And so where are you going to go? I mean, if we're unwilling to talk about broadening the revenue base, if we're unwilling to talk about all Alaska families contributing to the costs, if we're unwilling to talk about having non-residents pay the 7 to 10% they would pay if we used a broad-based tax, if we're unwilling to have that discussion, it's the PFD. It's the PFD that gets squeezed. So it shouldn't be the case. PFDs are paid, for the 50th time. PFDs are paid from permanent fund earnings. The PFDs are fully funded. There's no problem with the funding base for the PFD. You can pay a statutory PFD and not cross any lines. But because that we're into this mode where we're going to tax the PFD to pay for government spending, lower oil prices are going to mean more pressure on the PFD, significantly more pressure on the PFD. And it doesn't look like anybody is going to press for, trying to get the top 20% involved yet. So oil prices are going to be a big factor this session, but they're going to be a depressing factor this session.
All right, well, let's move on to number 3, which is where's Alaska headed next, and who's leading the charge in where we're going.
So Nat Hertz has started a new Substack page. Substack is where a lot of people go to write columns, op-ed columns that aren't appearing in the newspaper, and it's a pretty good source of information. Nat Hertz, no longer with the ADN, no longer with Alaska Public Media, has started writing a Substack column, and he's had some really good ones for the past few weeks. He's got a new one out. The title of it is going back to the top. Title is Under Attack on Many Fronts, Ada now faces a leadership void. And it talks about the fact that the Ada executive director has announced his resignation, that he's going to go on to other things, and leaving that spot, the leadership spot in Ada, as a void. Here's the thing. I mean, Ada was set up during the Hammond administration. Ada was set up to be the government entity if we needed economic activity, if government needed to be involved in economic activity. it was going to be through ADA. It was going to be through a professionally managed, professionally operated sort of venture capital fund that was going to become involved in projects and give backing to projects, either financing them or underwriting their debt so they could get lower debt costs. ADA was the entity that was going to do all that. And ADA historically has played, some role in the state in trying to drive the economy. Not always successful. In fact, often not successful. The fish plant that's now a church in South Anchorage is a great example of that. But that's been where, if you're going to jumpstart the economy, that's where we're going to jumpstart the economy, through ADA. And Nat's article is a great one in terms of describing the fact that, there's been a lot of people who have left ADA, leaving it with a leadership void. And it really is a good analysis of the fact that ADA had failed, was failing anyway, even with the leadership still there, was failing anyway, to explain to Alaskans its role and to sort of justify its existence and to defend the projects it's been involved in. So the question is, if Alaska, if the legislature thinks, if the Senate thinks that we need to get involved, that the state needs to get involved in the economy, we need to help, that the state needs to help revitalize the economy, who's going to do it? I mean, if ADA is sort of falling apart, if ADA can't explain, what the activities it's involved in, who's going to do it? And hopefully not the legislature directly. I mean, ADA was set up to depoliticize the process, at least make it somewhat professional, as opposed to the legislature, the 21 and 11 plus 1 getting to pick and choose, what industries got subsidized from the government. ADA at least was supposed to professionalize that. But if ADA is not, operating at its strongest, there will be some push in the legislature to say, well, we need to do it directly, because ADA isn't really solving the problem. So there's a question. I mean, Nat raises the question: what's going to lead Alaska forward, and who's going to be leading it if ADA is leaderless?
Well, it's an interesting discussion, and I guess we'll see what happens from here. Again, I shudder to think every time the government says we're going to drive the economy, because it never works out the way that they anticipated. ADA is a perfect example of that. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, thank you for coming on board. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking to you again next week.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we're out of time for this hour. We got to go. The Michael Dukes Show. Be kind, love one another, live well. I know that this discussion, and we touched on it briefly earlier, but that's the thing. The governor, we need more revenues. We need different revenues is what we need. We need to stop dragging from the permanent fund. And I'm a little disheartened to think that the governor is not going to, as you point out, the funding for the PFD is there. The funding for the PFD is viable. It's the earnings reserve account. I mean, the money's there. The question is, can they control their appetite for spending? We think the answer is obviously no, but it means that we're going to have to find some, and there's going to be no discussion on the fiscal policy working group ideas. There's going to be no where we could take $300 or $400 million out of the oil industry and taxes that are still on the table that I think are viable. There's no talk about a sales tax or a flat tax or anything else. There's no talk about efficiencies. It's just going to be a full run for the border at this point.
There's no stopping point. It's sort of like savings. There was no stopping point. There was no point at which you could say you can't go any further than this because, we violate some covenant or the Constitution puts a prohibition on draining savings more than that amount. There's no stopping point. And we saw in the 2010s what happens when there's no stopping point. You come up with different rationalizations every year, but it's a rationalization about why you need to drain savings further. There's no stopping point with the PFD. I mean, once they broke into it, and once they started taxing it, once they started diverting money from the private sector through the PFD into government, which is the classic definition of tax. Once they broke into it, there's no stopping point. unless the governor, digs in his heels and says, no more. I'm going to veto anything that's predicated on taking any more out of the PFD than this. Has strong heels as opposed to round heels.
Right.
Unless that happens, there's no stopping point. And so it's just a little bit, just like we went through in the 20 teens. It's just a little bit every year as we go down through it. To me, the thing that stops it, the thing that stops spending, is if all Alaskans have to contribute to the cost of government spending. If it can't be pushed off on middle and lower income Alaskans, if all Alaskans, including the top 20%, have to contribute, then I think we see people saying, whoa. It was fine if you wanted to spend somebody else's money on that project, but don't spend mine. I mean, no, I'm not going to give you any more revenue. Stop spending. But there needs to be a stopping point on the PFD in order to do that. So hopefully the governor, you would hope the governor digs in. The governor has sharp heels and digs in and gets ready to, fend off anybody who wants to spend more predicated on deeper cuts than 50-50 to the POMV, 50-50 to the PFD, that he calls that his stopping point and his bottom line. But, he didn't do it the couple of years before we got into big money last year. We'll see if his second term has changed him.
Well, and I guess that's the thing. Does he want to be known as the guy that tried to protect the PFD? I mean, again, gaming this out, and we've only got a couple minutes, but gaming this out, let's say Dunleavy wants to run for Senate, for the U.S. Senate, because you and I talked about that here recently, running for the U.S. Senate. Let's say that he wanted to do that. Does he want to be known as the guy that tried to save the PFD and win some kudos there? And like you said, brings the red pen out and does that? Or what how does that affect in the long run?
I think if he wants to leave a legacy, I think he just sort of rocks. If what his real plan is to run against Lisa in 6 years, I think he just sort of rocks along these next 4 years the same way he did the last 4 years, and really tries just to stay out of the headlines and to avoid getting a recall petition filed against him. I think he just sort of rocks along the same way. If he wants to leave a legacy, though, a lot of people have said he's the first Republican to be reelected as governor since Jay Hammond. Well, if he wants to be the Jay Hammond of the next Jay Hammond, if he wants to leave a legacy, then he needs to protect the PFD. He needs to lock in, get those sharp heels, dig in, and say POMV 50-50 is it. If you're going to do something beyond that, you raise revenues someplace else. Not my fault. I'm ready to cut. If you want additional spending, you need to raise additional revenues, legislature, and go to it. If you think you need to tax the oil companies, go to it. If you're ready to finally have all Alaskans pay for it, go to it. But somebody, if he wants to leave a legacy, that's what he does. He digs in his heels and says, "I'm fighting for the POMV 50-50. That's my red line. We're not going to go across that." Hopefully that's what he does at some point. I'm not entirely sure that's in his nature, but he's really the only one right now who's in government who's able to do that. And it's not going to be the Senate. We already know that they're going to run it down like they did the savings in the 20 teens. Likely not going to be the House. So it's really up to the governor if he wants to leave a legacy to lock in and defend that red line.
Let me turn this back up. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Our guest talking about where we go from here. I would hope that this is the direction that we're going to go, Brad, but I don't have much faith, unfortunately, in the governor or in this legislature that there's going to be any kind of restrictions, that there's going to be any kind of containment on this spending. And I unfortunately think that we're going to see a lot more of it. So we'll have to watch it. But that's it for today. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Good to talk with you. All right, folks, we're coming up on thank you, Brad. We're coming up on the second hour Hour 2. That's what it is. Hour 2 of the big radio show. The Michael Duke Show continues in just a moment. You're home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast. The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Across the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the audio-only live stream, the links to everything, the social media sites and everything where we simulcast it, and, of course, links to the podcast, which is available at Castbox, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, and, of course, Spotify. So welcome to the program, and thanks for coming in and joining us. Hour 2 of the big radio show. And you know what? I'm going to open up the phone lines this morning. We're going to open them up and we're going to see what else that you guys want to chat about this morning. I want to hear, whatever your thoughts are on what Brad just laid out there. Some interesting things, talking about the size and scope of government, talking about where we go from here as far as, now that there is no savings left. We just reinstated the big spending crowd, and they have no more money to draw on outside of taking it from the PFD, which we've seen is the answer, right? That's what they've already said it. They've already telegraphed what's coming. We are committed to the largest dividend we can afford. But we also know that there are state services that are critical. Education probably comes to the forefront of our thoughts, says Kathy Giesel. So we already know that, the code for the largest dividend we can afford means we'll give you whatever's left over when we're done spending. And I would make the argument that the legislature, as it sits right now, is emboldened by the fact that they were all just returned to office. Right? I mean, that's where they're at. They are emboldened by the fact that they are basically have been returned to office. And what else are you going to do? We're here. This is a mandate. People have told us they want us to spend this money on the government. So we're going to do it. And that's where we're at. Now, again, the hope is that the House is somehow able to pull itself together under a Republican majority and is able to gridlock some of the things that the Senate got. But I don't have a lot of faith in that right now, because again, we're talking about a 21 majority out of 40. And one of those 21 Republicans is Louise Stutes, who has never been shy about jumping from one side of the tracks to the other. and again can wield a tremendous amount of power by positioning herself in one place or another. I don't think that you would see a Republican majority elect Louise Stutes as Speaker of the House. She might get some chairmanships or something of one of the committees, or I don't, but hey, the Democratic coalition has got no problem putting her in as the speaker, with, of course, Bryce Edgmond standing behind her over her shoulder giving advice, right? So if she jumps alone, it's 2020. If Eastman remains, and if the other legislators can form a coalition around Eastman, who is, I mean, he's not he's a pretty inflexible guy. And so I guess, again, my whole thing here is that I don't have high hopes that somehow it's going to work out where the Republicans are going to take majority and they're going to be able to kind of fight off and stymie off some of the things that are coming out of the Senate. I don't know. I just don't know. And that's the thing. At this point, it could come down that way. This is all, and somebody just said this is all speculation. It's all speculation at this point. You're right. It is. Because we don't know what the judge is going to say in the Eastman case. We don't know what what kind of legal challenges there's going to be in the Armstrong case. It could be a 22 majority, which changes the flavor of everything slightly. Eastman could, I would think it would be insane if they declared Eastman ineligible for the seat. Because of his membership into Oath Keepers. But, it's interesting. How flexible is your liberty? Because I made the comment about Eastman being inflexible. Look, liberty is not a suicide pact, James. There are things we didn't get here all in one fell swoop, and we won't get back in all in one fell swoop. We're going to have to try and do our best that at least if we're falling forward, right? Even if we're failing, we're at least failing back towards the goal of liberty. There's never going to be one fell swoop where you get the perfect ideal of any kind of freedom and liberty, because we didn't get there in that same kind of vein. So, it's going to be interesting. All right. Phone number to call. Sorry, I guess I told you to call us and then I didn't give you the phone number. 907-433-3150. 907-433-3150. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on thoughts about, what Brad just went over, your thoughts about the coalition that was created in the Senate. I'd love to hear what your take is on this overall. Again, I don't want to be the full-on Debbie Downer here. I'm not trying to be a full-on, a downer about it. I think that there is, but again, we have to have that potential to prepare for the worst and hope for the best, right? We have to be prepared for and again, yesterday we kind of went over, worst case scenarios of basically the business as usual, the spend crowd, the take your PFD and spend crowd. They're in full control of the Senate, and they could potentially be in control of the House here soon. And then you'll have a full legislature with the only thing standing in your way is Governor Dunleavy, which, well, let's face it, is not awe-inspiring, right? The track record of the governor heretofore is not one that inspires a great deal of confidence that he is going to stand in the gap and try and reduce government spending to the, on any of this. And the thing is, again, worst case scenario, and I know this is worst case. Again, I'm not trying to depress you. I'm trying to prepare you for and maybe it doesn't happen and we're all happy. But worst case scenario, if you do get in a situation where both the Senate and the House is controlled by the take your PFD and spend crowd, that means that even if the governor stands in the gap and breaks out the red pen and starts to scratch out lines on the budget, there is the potential that they could just override him. They've got the full thing to override him at that point. If they control both things and they could just override the veto. So he's got to make some calculations. Does he veto it, appear to stand strong and beat his chest about, I'm going to stand in the gap, and then get mowed down, which is a loss of political face, a loss of political capital? Again, I'm not encouraged by the governor's track record thus far. But I mean, who knows? Maybe he will. Maybe if he's just lame duck, he's not worried about getting reelected. Maybe he's not running in 6 years, or even in what is Sullivan in 2 years? Even if he's running for Senate or not running for Senate, maybe he doesn't care. He can just stand in the gap. But if he's planning on running for higher office, how does that figure into it? I mean, this is all speculation at this point. But all I'm saying is, if you want to know where somebody's been, look at where they, see where somebody's going. You look at where they've been, and we can look back at the history of the governor, and you see that in these games of political chicken, he's blinked a lot. I mean, there was some strong, it was strong out of the gate. And that was when he had, Donna Ardwin and stuff on his side. I mean, he came out of the gate strong. And then immediately floundered. I mean, some would say rolled over and wet on himself. I mean, that it's happened. And we haven't seen a really any kind of strength out of him since. So we'll have to see where it goes from here. All right. We're coming up on the break, and we didn't have any phone calls, so we'll leave the lines open for the last segment of the show. But we got Chris Story coming in here, and people are in there going, "Oh, we need Chris. We need to talk to Chris. We need some of this," because obviously we've been beating the hell out of you all morning. So it is what it is. So sorry about that. I'm just trying to lay down as much. I'm trying to speculate and game theory things out with you here. Because like I said, we don't know what's going to happen. We can guess based on past performance. Past performance is indicative of future results kind of thing. But that's all it is right now is guessing games. We'll see what happens. Chris Story is coming on. Can't understand why Dunleavy doesn't come on the show anymore. We've offered him. We were an ally of his. We wanted to talk to him about all these things, but it's tough when he won't even come on the show of people who are friendly to him. That also leads to my lack of faith. All right, we got to go. Chris Story's up next. The Michael Luke Show. Common Sense Radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Anyone interested in hiring a lobbyist for Juneau next session? We need to help fight. Will the people help save our PFD, says Juanita. I mean, what do we need? Do we need a citizens advocate? Is that what we need? We need to pay to have somebody to lobby down there. For on the citizen side, I mean, that's an expensive proposition, by the way. Those lobbyists are not cheap. But if you get 100,000 people together and they all throw $5 in the kitty, sure, we could do that. Aaron says, I'd rather that Dunleavy try. He really ticked me off. I was all for him, and then he let the recall unions win, and he tucked tail and just wussed out. I held my nose and voted for him this time. But if I was given a different candidate other than a Democrat, I would have voted for that person in a heartbeat. Well, this is it's true. I mean, we had Charlie Pierce and we had Mike Dunleavy, and that was it. And a lot of us who voted for Pierce, you didn't even need it. Didn't even need it because Dunleavy took the tops without even having to go to round 2. So we'll see. Scrolling back here. Michael, we need a good news show on Thursday. Again, I'm not trying to beat you down, and I apologize if that's what it comes up as, but we have to face the facts of what we're looking at. We have to be prepared for what's coming this session, and I'm just trying to, again, predict or game theory out based on what these people have done in the past, what I think we're going to be looking for in the future. Let's see. David Eastman is a solid conservative with the law on his side. His constituents voted him into office. The courts will follow the law and toss out the oak coop. I hope so, because to me, that's ridiculous. There was enough coverage of all that people knew that he was a member. And by the way, this is like, and I made this comment before, this is like saying, as a life member of the NRA, you 100% support everything that the NRA does because you bought a life membership 15 years ago. And like, I never was a member of the NRA, life member of the NRA. I bought the memberships, but when the NRA started screwing around with certain things, I quit giving them money. But if I had popped for that life membership back in the day, would that mean that I was responsible for all this nonsense and everything else in New York? I mean, 12, 15 years ago, Oath Keepers seemed like a pretty solid organization. I mean, I read the David Codrea used to write for them, right? And I had interviewed some of the members and we talked about, on the air and it seemed like a pretty solid organization. Seems like over the last, now I haven't really read anything from them for the last 6 or 7 years, but it seemed like they were pretty solid. But over the last 6 or 7 years, they've kind of, gone a little wacky. But if you had bought a life membership, do you have to renounce your life membership? And again, the people that voted for Eastman knew about this. So they supported him in spite of kind of thing. You may not agree with him. You may not agree with his tactics. You may not agree with whatever, but his constituency voted him in. And to disenfranchise those people, that's some crazy stuff. And I would agree that I think that the judge will probably toss this all out. All right. We got Chris Story on the line with us this morning. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. I'm fantastic. Ready to roll.
Good. I'm glad. Thanks for coming in and being part of it with us today. We're going to, whoops, I got to go change this real quick.
Well, as long as you hold on to the negatives and won't give me all the photos, I don't have a choice, do I?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know exactly what I'm talking about here. All right. We're going to kick things off here in just a second and be ready to go. What's your topic for today, Chris? Quickly.
Epic living with Epicurus.
Okay, epic living, Epicurus. Let's get it going on the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Okay, welcome back to the program. Hour 2 continues. Chris Story is the man from Homer. He comes on, joins us every week to talk about, well, all kinds of stuff. Pottery, positivity, and how not to become a nihilist. That's what it's all about this morning. Chris Story, our guest. Good morning, my friend. How are you? We're going to talk about some epic living today.
Now, what's the use?
I know. I'm being castigated in the chat room for being such a Debbie Downer today. I'm just trying to be, I'm trying to be realistic so that I can plan my positivity later on, right? I mean, that's, I'm not a nihilist. I believe that it's important to do what we need to do. But anyway, save me from myself, Story.
Well, maybe we'll go back to 300 BC and discover epic living with Epicurus, who was a great Greek philosopher. Ironically, not much, well, I say ironically, which you'll understand in a moment, not much is left of his written philosophy, but he was a pretty interesting guy. And he said that the wise amongst us, the wise, will accomplish 3 things in their life. Are you ready for those 3 things, Michael? Do you consider yourself wise, first of all?
Well, I mean, I don't know how wise I am, but I'm ready to hear what wise people have once said.
It's interesting because in this day and age, you can identify as anything you want. So why not identify as wise?
Is that a trick question?
All right. Epicurus said that the wise will accomplish these 3 things in their lifetimes. First of all, leave written works behind, which is why I said it's a little ironic that only a few things survive of what Epicurus wrote. He wrote a lot. He wrote, of course, we're talking 300 BC. Not much survived except for 3 letters and then a handful of sort of an essay of quotes. But 3 letters that he had written to 3 different people survived, in which much of his philosophy was recorded in those letters. But I think it's interesting that he says that the wise amongst us will leave written works. And I think he's proven the point that his letters, when's the last time you wrote a letter to a friend or a family member or something other than a Yelp review, be good or bad? It could be books. Winston Churchill published 10 million words in his lifetime. I don't remember the number of books, but it was an outrageous number of books that Winston Churchill had written and published. Not all of them, even by his own estimation, were good. However, you don't have to do that. What about journals? What about your memoirs that you write just simply for your own family to read later, or letters that you write? I think the written word is really what he's saying here is very important for a wise person. Leave written works behind you.
And is this why, I mean, you journal and you talk about it? I mean, is this one of the reasons why that's important to you?
I think so. And I think it's something, I've talked about many times is that, when you do write something down, it engages your brain in a different way. And I think another quote that I really like is, I don't know what I think about something till I write about it. I forget who said it, but it's irrelevant because I think it's such a great point. Sometimes in the writing, you get to refine and define and kind of sort of coalesce what it is you actually think about something into the written word, and then you get to leave it behind. Imagine if you could go back and find a journal that your great grandfather or great grandmother or aunt or uncle had left behind. You're like, wow, I didn't know this is how they felt about a particular thing. I think it's important to define what it is you think and how you think about something, your own philosophy in a written work. And the second thing Epicurus said that the wise will accomplish in their lifetime is to become financially prudent and provide for the future. So obviously there's not much wisdom amongst our elected leadership, be it locally or federally, but financial prudency and providing for the future. And of course, this, I can't help but insert 2 words here. You know what I'm going to say. Real estate. Real estate is about the most financially prudent thing one can do and provide for the future. But just that notion that, going forward, Buckminster Fuller defined wealth as the amount of income you have today, and prosperity is the amount of income you have going forward without working for it. So wealth and prosperity go hand in hand. They're 2 different things, 2 different sides of the same coin. And I think it is the wise amongst us are thinking about, how you're living your lifestyle today, but also thinking about going forward and providing for the future. And that could be the next generation or just your own future. but I think that that's pretty wise nonetheless.
I mean, it definitely. I mean, those two things seem pretty simple. I mean, not. I guess the second one, not as simple because we're all chasing wealth. It seems like, or prosperity in our lives, but it seems like an adequate goal. So, okay,
Yeah. I mean, but
you
the
know,
truth of it is, everything that is true is simple. I just love that he put it in such simplistic ways that there's only three, there's three things. He could have just as easily said there's 33 things that the wise will accomplish. There's one thing or whatever. But I think the truth really does live in simplicity. And that's why it's so often overlooked. But your point is taken. These are very simple. Leave written works behind. Okay. What though do you put to paper or pen to paper, or even if you saved it on a computer or whatever in the cloud, whatever it is, today's technology allows for you to leave written works behind in a lot of ways. I think just the impermanency, though, of your tirade on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, whatever, that is so non-permanent, unless, of course, you go to host the Oscars one day and something you said 12 years ago on Twitter resurfaces. But,
right then
but
the
it's
internet's
just,
forever. Other than that, it just kind of goes into the ether, right?
right. But it's not your real estate. You don't own that. You're just renting this space. And so anything I write on Facebook, for example, that I want to hang on to is if I feel like, oh, I want to share this little bit of wisdom or something that I've from a book I'm reading or whatever, I've always written it down somewhere else. Like I have a binder with about 800 pages, typewritten pages in it that are my On Top of the World radio in a minute. The little scripts that I write for that little 1 minute radio show I've been doing for the last 9 years. I have every single one of them saved in a written copy, but I also have them in Word. I have them on notes on my phone, but I don't trust that, and I put them into a binder that I hang on to just as this giant manuscript because I want to leave it behind. I want to make a record of it, and one of these days I'm going to put them into a book format and publish it. But for today, I'm just making sure that I've got that written word somewhere, and there's a written record of it. And the third thing that Epicurus said relative to living a wise life is to cherish country living. And the way I interpret that is he's talking about nature. He's talking about reflecting on God's creation.
Well, this is, wait a second, just for context, this is Epicurus. I mean, they were not living in a modern day metropolis, right? I mean, this was, still pretty, this was still pretty basic, even if you were living in the city. So getting back to the country lifestyle means back to nature then.
But I think you could find that anywhere. And of course, the Greeks were, founders of great architecture and so forth. And they had buildings and hustle and bustle, all relative, of course, nothing compared to today. But even then, one had to go out of their way to just be in nature and to really appreciate, quote, country living, meaning, in my opinion, just a reflection on God's creation. And I do count, though, man's creation amongst God's creation. I think we are of an extension, and what we create is admirable. And I love architecture. I actually really admire what we are imparting upon the earth, and not just the giant holes. I'm not talking about just for all the electric car batteries and the strip mining and everything that has to go on in the third world with slave labor and so forth to accommodate that. I'm talking about what we build and the good things that we've done, and everything from airliners to highways to skyscrapers and small buildings, everything. When I used to live in Anchorage back in 1991, my daughter and I would, she was about 2.5 or 3, we would go to Homer a couple times a week, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. What we called Homer was a little pathway down to Campbell Creek. We had a condo there off of C Street, just above Diamond, and Campbell Creek runs right through there. And it used to not have the developed trail that it has now, and the bridges and all the encampments and so forth. It was just very quiet little bend in the Campbell Creek, and we take this little trail down through there, and we consider that Homer. So we're right in the middle of this big city, the biggest city I'd ever lived in. And we would go find that little pocket of nature. We'd find that little Homer. We called it, let's go to Homer. She said, yeah. We hustle down there to the Campbell Creek and look at the spawning salmon. But I think you can find it wherever you are. And I think it's important. So just to reiterate, he said the 3 things that wise people will accomplish in their life is to leave a written work behind you, leave a written record, be financially prudent, and provide for the future, and cherish country living. I don't know. That just really struck me when I was reading about Epicurus. It just struck me and said, I'm going to share that with Michael. I think you'll like this.
Well, I mean, I definitely find it to be interesting now, and I immediately realize where my failing is because I don't do a lot of writing. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I had proposed at one point to do a bi-monthly newsletter or something for listeners and things like that. And what I found was I struggled with it to try and put my work. What I ended up doing for the 2 or 3 newsletters that I put together is that I ended up turning on my voice to text, my speak freely thing. And I just ended up talking and putting my thoughts down on paper in that way. I found that, I found that to be easier, but I have never been very good about, writing things and journaling and things like that. I was always encouraged to do those things when I was younger, but it was just one of those things that I had a hard time with. So how do you,
whatever, it's like John Lennon said, whatever gets you through the night, that's fine. That's a great way to do it. Earl Stanley Gardner created the character we love in Perry Mason. And he wrote some 85 Perry Mason novels, which were only about a third of all the novels Earl Stanley Gardner wrote. How did he do it? How did he accomplish it? He did just what you said. He dictated. He had secretaries, number of secretaries, and he would just pace in his office and tell them the story, and they would actually write it down
No
for
kidding.
him.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Maybe we need to, maybe that's something I need to revisit. Maybe I should be reading my journals into my computer every night so that I can have a copy of it or do something like that. I mean, I like it. I mean, epic living. And, when you talk about getting back to nature, that reminds me of it reminds me of Walden. It reminds me of a lot of these thoughts about, again, getting into that quiet space with nature and being not one with yourself, but being at one with the world and being at one with God and, kind of having that quiet space. And I think that's something that in this hustle and bustle of today, we forget. It's something that I struggle with, to do on a regular basis, at least once or twice a year. I kind of get back to nature and do things. And, my trips to Homer in a lot of ways are that because I spend a lot of time just watching the ocean and thinking and, and having that quiet moment of reflection, but it's not nearly enough, I think. And that's a reminder, not just Epicurus, but many, many philosophers have extolled the virtues of getting back to nature.
I agree. And I think, like I said, you can find a pocket of it wherever you are. I think whether you're in New York City or Palmer or Homer, Alaska, it doesn't matter. We have a good friend and our associate broker in our office, her and her husband, Amanda and Dan Metke, just ended a 30-day journey through the Grand Canyon and zero cellular connection, zero any sort of connection with other people. That's epic. That's huge. Well, I'm never going to do that, to be quite frank with you. I'm never going to cherish country living to that extent.
Right.
But I find it in my own ways, and we all can. And wherever you are, you can find that country living, as Epicurus said. And again, back to your point, I mean, 300 BC, that probably was a lot easier just to wander outside the city walls. But of course, then you might, get killed as well. But it doesn't matter. It's just this idea that if you could appreciate it or cherish it and find a little pocket here or there, it will improve your life.
Chris Story, the man from Homer, ilovehomeralaska.com. I realized I've still got his on top of the worldradio.com link at the top of the thing for today. Chris, before we run out of time here, we've only got a couple minutes. I want to talk a little bit about your new books that are coming out and what you're doing here for the Christmas time and the holiday season. Give me the rundown of what's happening.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that opportunity. I really wanted to have The Watchmen ready and published already. I wanted your mouth on my words. I wanted you to already be reading it for me, but I just finished it and getting ready to turn it into the editor. Tiffany's reading it currently, and then my editor will take it hopefully by Friday. Maybe by Christmas I'll have it maybe ready, but that's my goal. But The Watchmen is a continuation of my Jacob Mann series, who's a heroic realtor. I was tired of seeing realtors as boobs and thieves and nincompoops on movies and TVs. Are always this sort of idiot that stumbles upon something or is scheming towards something. And I thought, realtors live a pretty epic life. I mean, we're at the tip of the spear when it comes to, going into a dark, vacant, empty home, or, there's just a lot of adventures that happen in the life of a realtor. And over these 20 years, I've collected a lot of ideas and stories. And I said, that's it. So we started with The Making of a Man, next with The Watchmen. I've already got like 10 other stories ready to go. Maybe I should also hire a couple secretaries and start doing that.
Yeah, maybe you should just start wandering around and, I got to tell you, just get yourself some of that Dragon Speak Freely software, and you can put a headset on and wander around the room and talk all you want, and then all you got to do is go back and edit it. It would be interesting. I will say that we all laugh, a heroic realtor, but when I read The Making of Man the first time, I'd never thought about having to go into a property that you'd never been to, never, going into some place that's dark and dank and what you might find. And I mean, it was a great story. I really, really enjoyed The Making of Man, and I'm looking forward to, part of the reason why I love to read your stuff is because, first of all, I get first crack at it. I love that I get early release. But second of all, to be able to perform it is cool. And I really love the character of Jacob Mann. So I think that, I can't wait. I can't wait to see it, and I can't wait to hear it. And of course, that's the fictional side. You still got the Backyard Millionaire. You've got Born to Live, and these are all fantastic works of self-help and kind of making your life better. So go find them. They're over on your website right now, right?
Yes, ilovehomeralaska.com.
All right. And of course, you can find some of them on Audible as well, read by yours truly. It's good stuff. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thank you, my friend, for coming on board. As always, it's good to talk with you today.
My privilege. Thank you.
Folks, we got phone lines going to be open up next. We're going to take some of your calls. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend. Michael Duke Show.
In the break, finishing up, Chris Story. Any final thoughts, my friend, since you stayed on the line with us? I appreciate that. What, anything else that you want to share with us?
Well, last time, I was listening over and you're like, well, you hung up on me. You just hung up. I thought you wanted me off. What are you doing to me? But you want me out of here like a bad smell.
Yeah, no, I was like, get out of here, man. I'm done with you.
Get out of here.
Thanks for filling up my show. You're out of here now. Good. Bye.
That's it. Get out. I'm looking forward to the holidays, and I got a lot cooking, but everything's good. Are you enjoying it? Are you in Palmer or Wasilla? It doesn't matter. Does anybody really care?
I'm in Wasilla. Well, it's only 40 miles difference. No big deal. But yeah, no, I'm in Wasilla. I'm out on Knik Goose Bay. So I look down on the Knik Arm, and
you look down on everybody.
I look down.
Soldotna and Kenai is the same thing. I just never understand why Soldotna and Kenai don't just get married, just divide it. You guys are one and the same. We all think of, nobody says, you think of one, you think of the other.
Right.
So Palmer, Wasilla, guys. Which one is the one where the butcher baker buried all the bodies? Was that
that was in Palmer?
Palmer?
That was in It was in Palmer. He was out in that area, more in that area than in the Wasilla area. Mm-hmm. But what he really did is he flew them out way out. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so anyway, well, it's good.
Don't let that keep you up at night, Michael.
No, not at all. Well, in fact, my wife and I are about to do a podcast. My wife is a true crime junkie, and we're about to do a podcast that she's been wanting to do for a while that focuses exclusively on Alaska true crime. And
what a great idea.
Yeah, it's going to be called Frozen in Crime, and it's
I love it.
Yeah, so it's going to be
when does that drop?
It'll drop sometime after the new year. We're going to be working on it over the holidays, and we've already got a bunch of stuff put together for it, so it should be fun.
I love it.
It'll be her and I just hanging out, doing our thing, and talking about it. She's going to educate me on a lot of these stories that I have because I have almost zero interest in true crime. So, but it should be an interesting discussion. And Butcher Baker is one that we're going to talk about, the Israel Keys. She's got a bunch of stories already lined out. So
a friend of mine was a counselor at the Seward Spring Creek Correctional Facility there, and knew him. If you ever want to connect with him, he was like a psychotherapist in there. He would be an interesting guy to interview. Anyway, I'll get you connected to him if you want.
No, that would be great. We'd love to do that. That would be a fun thing. So, it's just in my spare time, the things that you do.
That's
time,
right. That's cool. I'm looking forward to that. I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it'll be a fun discussion. So we'll see what's going on with that. All right, my
buddy.
friend. Well,
I
can't wait to hear. I can't wait to see a copy of it when it's all said and done. So tell your wife to hurry and then get it onto the editor. All right, my friend.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much. Care. Good to talk with you. Chris Story, our guest here on the Michael Duke Show. Okay. That brings us back to phone calls. We've had somebody on hold for 15 minutes. And we're going to see what they have to say. Let's get their name and where they're calling from. They got to unmute everything over here first and see who they are or where they're calling from. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Mike, just from Homer.
Well, hello, my friend. How are you?
Been up in the North Woods with my boys hunting deer, having a blast.
Oh, good.
Deer.
Well,
funny you guys were talking about getting back to nature. Well, we've been there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, Jeff, we'll hold the line. I'll be right back to you here in a minute, and we'll kick things off. It's good to hear from you. Been like, let me get caught up in the chat room here to see what else you guys are talking about here. Let's see. Going back through here, anything that you guys are talking about. The voters spoke. The voters elected. Wait a second. What's Tuckerman saying? The voters spoke. The voters elected anti-PFD Senator Stevens over Smith, Bjorkman over Babcock, Giesel over Holland, Clayman over Costello, Merrick over McCarthy, Dunbar over Satterfield, Hoffman over Keppel, Bishop over Verhagen. The voters decided the PFD is toast. And yeah, I mean, to me, that is probably one of the hardest truths out of this last election is that people just, I thought they cared about the PFD more than they did. And it's disappointing. It's very disappointing, but that's where we're at right now. They cared more about, or maybe it was just the ambivalence. Again, remember the low voter turnout. Maybe people are just, they're just burned up and tired of the whole poo parade. But yeah, that was probably the most discouraging thing to me, is to figure out that people just didn't care about the PFD. It didn't seem to care about government spending, and they put those people back in there. And this is the big government spend crowd. So we're going to see what happens. But yeah, interesting stuff to say the least. All right, we're 12 seconds out. We're ready to rejoin here and jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Jeff's on the line. We'll see what he has to say. Here we go. All right, one final segment here of the program this morning, and we're going to open up the phone lines to talk about, well, whatever you want to talk about. Let's get into that. We'll take some calls. Jeff is on the line from Homer. Been quite a while since we heard from Jeff. In fact, somebody at one point said, "Is Jeff alive? Is he okay?" But apparently he is, because he's back on the air with us. Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm good. I'm still in Maine, sitting in my son's house right now. We just got out of the North Woods, the extreme North Woods, and no phones, and like a Gilligan Island up there, just nothing.
Just nothing.
And had
just
a blast.
Nothing.
We had our camp, and we shot some deer and partridge, and just had a great week. And that's what I came here for. Was I have 7 grandkids, and my 3 kids and my 2 boys to teach them more. I realized that I needed to be back here for a while to teach these kids some more stuff. Got here, filled the oil tanks. They thought I was crazy. I'm not so crazy now, with the shortage over here, and all of that. And I've studied the ranked choice voting in the state of Alaska, and I call it ranked choice cheating. But anyways, what we need to do is figure out who gets to do that ranking. Who are those people? That's a question you need to ask yourself, because, in the United States, last I knew, we should have a one-day vote. It should be counted. Whoever got the most votes wins, not we're going to give somebody else's votes to them, because that's not the way it should go. And I feel if it's just one vote more, they should win. And there's a lot of that going on in the country, and they're pushing for that. And you'll find that Murkowski's behind that with a lot of money out of D.C. I mean, Schumer and them sent, 20 million up there, something. I don't know what it was. I can't remember now. I've seen so many stats. And it's just craziness, and it's going on all over the country. Here we are with Georgia, doesn't know who's going to be their senator yet. So we need to not give up. We need to get going worse. Just get built up better with this whole deal, and go back to voting. But we also need to figure out something about that ranked choice voting, because it's not every time you study it, it's different, and it seems to be partial to one side and not to the other. And he who has the most money wins, and that seems to be the theory, or the torch they carry. If we got more money than you, we're going to win. That's why they laugh at us. Well, the Biden administration actually had a party after they lost the House, because they know what they were doing. They're going to cheat and spend money. So.
Well, look, there's already been discussions. There's already a petition going around to repeal ranked choice voting. I know it's going to make it into the legislature in one way, shape, or form. And yet at the same time, I see stories in major news magazines and everything else about what a success it was. And I think that's misleading, because, again, look at the difference. We went from a 48% vote to down to a 40%, 43% vote. We saw less participation in this election than ever before. Less than half of the registered voters even bothered to vote. Now, I would love to see 100% voter participation. We know that is not realistic. But, the bottom line is, we need to get more folks involved. We need to get them squared away on that. And the problem is that they are, I think, frustrated, Jeff. I think they're frustrated with this whole situation.
Well, that in Alaska's, it's a tough place. There's a lot of people out lying. There's a lot of people that, it's a problem for them to come and vote. And I'm sure, what I know about Alaska, I've been all over, and there's some people that just, like me, I was gone for 2 weeks here up in the North Woods. I don't know what the heck happened, and don't much care. I had a great time. And, I just want to tell people, everybody needs to go do that once in a while, because you will come back and look at your phone like, leave that in the truck now. I'm not going to listen to that anymore. I'm not going to watch the news. I haven't watched news. I don't know what's going on there. I don't care, because most of it's, as you say, misleading. That's a polite way to put it. And it's just, you get away from the world. And to call up and you're talking to Chris Story about getting back to nature. Now, really? I just came back from nature.
Yeah, no.
And it was just like, well, goodness sakes, wow, that's cool. And but it brings your thinking back to where you should be. Not all of this garbage that they're putting out today, from transgender to fighting, and the stupid things they're saying and the things that are going on. You can't even turn your phone on without getting some of it, so it's a real good way to go about having a good time, and really not so much having a good time. I got back to nature where I was as a guide here of 38 years, My kids would say, Dad, where have you been today? And I said, well, I was over on that mountain over there, and then I went to that one, and I made it back before dark. They said, really? And I said, yeah. And they said, don't you worry about getting lost. I said, I'm never lost. I always know where I am. I'm right here. So, and I just laughed, but it's my kind of my backyard up there.
Well, so are you headed back up? Are you headed back up to Alaska soon?
I'm probably coming in the spring. I'm gonna spend the winter here. I want to ice fish. We don't have much ice fishing in Homer. I mean, you can go out. Last girlfriend I had in Homer brought back 150 pounds of ice and pretty near drowned me frying it up. So I don't know.
Right. You got to get it done.
Oh, that's a joke.
Well,
no, but it's I would like to spend some time with them here and show them some things about the ice fishing. They've learned a lot this year. They shot some nice deer. Because as a professional guide, I can show them a lot of things, and I would like to see them have that heritage and pass it on. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'll be back in April. Probably.
All right. Well, Jeff, it's good to hear from you. I'm glad to hear that everything's going well. Thanks for your thoughts on ranked choice voting and all the other mess that's going on. We appreciate you calling in this morning. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's good to hear your voice. And hello, everybody. I'm still alive. I'll be back.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Get to the trouble now.
That's right. We're all in trouble. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. 907-433-3150, 907-433-3150. If you'd like to sound off, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Feel free to give us a ring real quick and see what's going on. Coming down to it tomorrow, we're expecting to have Mike Shower on the program. We may try and get Mike Shower and Shelley Hughes and Rob Myers on in the next couple days, just to kind of get a feel for where the new minority, quote unquote, is going. I mean, it's not the worst part is that, of course, there's a rule that if you have a minority, that an official minority has to be like 5, because then you can get people onto the committees and stuff. This 3, they got nothing. It's shocking to say the least. All right. I got time for one more call, but we got to be quick. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Ron in Sterling.
Hey, Ron, quickly, what's on your mind?
Are we going to do a runoff as far as the Senate and the House goes?
No, the Senate or the House. The Senate is pretty much set. There may be a recount in the House, but there is no runoff. That's what they say. The ranked choice voting is a runoff. So there's not going to be any of that in the Senate. The House may have a recount, but that's about it. Ron, tune in with us in the morning, tomorrow morning. Maybe we can do this again and we can expound on that and I can answer some more of your questions. We're out of time. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, my friends, thank you for coming on board and being part of it today. As always, it's a pleasure to spend the morning with you, and we look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Make sure that you go over to YouTube before you quit today and you subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube. I'd like to get 1,000 subscribers. That's all I need is 1,000. I'm at 380 something this morning. Anyway, if you'd subscribe, I'd love it. Anyway, we appreciate you guys being part of it. We will see you tomorrow. Enjoy yourself. Be kind. And have a great day. You're going to have a great day. Stay warm. We'll see you.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.